everybody, welcome to Playbook by Laserforce Loveland. This podcast is a platform for laser tag players to geek out about strategies, stories, and ongoings in the Laserforce scene, and for you to join us as another player at the table. My codename is Mischief, and I'm a player from Loveland, Colorado, who loves to talk about tag, and tonight I'm joined by SgtTucker and Ghost from Loveland, Colorado. How you doing, gentlemen?
Doing all right. How about you?
We haven't even heard from Joe yet. What the heck?
Yeah.
Just throwing it back to me?
I was like, I'll wait, but I'm doing good.
Yeah, get wrecked, Joe. Gosh.
Yeah.
So
First and third place are hanging up on me.
the random draw East Coast 2025 is just wrapped up, and you know what's really fun? I just want to say it out loud. A quote this week came to mind from Theodore Roosevelt. He had a famous quote about the man in the arena. You ever heard of that quote, guys?
No.
He's had a lot of good quotes.
Oh, so many. Speak softly, carry a large
Allegedly.
stick. But he has this quote that, even if you're in the arena and you lose, you have so much more honor than the hecklers and the spectators jeering at you from the sidelines. And that's us, guys. We are like we're like the two old men from the Muppets sitting up in the audience just heckling and making comments. And no matter what we say today, if you played in East Coast 2025, you have so much more honor than any of the three of us. You actually went out and you fought and you did something. So anything we say, who cares? We're just a bunch of old hecklers. But that's what we're here to do today. You guys got to jump in. You got to be quick on these jokes. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to reflect on the tournament, talk about how right we were when we occasionally were right, how wrong we were when we were mostly wrong, and we're going to have some fun discussion about, how it all went. Any thoughts at the top of the show, guys? What'd you think of the tournament?
It was fun to watch. I think they did a good job with the broadcast, trying to figure out which cameras to have in there. So it gave people a bit of an inside view.
Thank you for not doing the 9-camera setup.
It was really hard to watch on mobile, honestly.
Yeah, some of us work for a living.
Yeah, and so I was having to really strain when we did the 9-camera, and then eventually I think day 2, they swapped over to 4 cameras with the other, I think 5 being blocked by, or no, I think they were doing 5 cameras because it was the corner 2 to the right and 2 below, and then so 4 of them got blocked out by the scoreboard. And I think that was a lot easier to
chef's kiss.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and they were all like important positions too. They weren't like, well, nothing's happening.
yeah. All right, so what we're going to do is just to kick off the show, we're each going to name something that we were right about in our predictions, something we were wrong about that we want to highlight, and something we were surprised by that was unexpected entirely. Jarrett, what is something that you were right about in this tournament?
Oh, man. That I was right about? I mean, I got right the fact that going off of feel was kind of the best for this tournament in predicting, and that stats in a random draw are so hard to go off of, just because of, I'm going to say this a lot during this stream, the human element. I mean, the one thing that I got especially right as far as predicting the human element was a certain Loveland player, James. I knew that James was going to go in there and kick some absolute butt, because James, as a human in different arenas, reacts so much differently to how it's played, how it goes, than most people I've ever seen. James is able to adapt to difficult situations, like the randomizer. When the randomizer gave James something that wasn't great, he overcame it and was able to persevere and push through. And I mean, the human element is a very real thing as far as the randomizer goes, and I knew some teams were going to get hit by it a little harder than others because skill is a factor in this tournament, but it's not as much of a factor as people think when it comes to the randomizer. The randomizer can give you your most skilled position or your worst position, but that element creates something different. People have good days, people have bad days. Stats are so hard to read, and this is coming from somebody that wants to be a sports analyst. So I live and breathe on stats. But there's always that element, and being able to predict that element as well as I was able to is something that I definitely got right.
Gotcha. Joe, what about you? What's something you got right?
So I was completely right about Autumn in particular. I felt like she was grossly undervalued, in my opinion, in the tournament. But I also think in the same breath, I need to mention that, all of the helmets, in my opinion, did spectacularly, which was something that I had honestly kind of expected. Autumn performed very, very well and was constantly subbing for teams, as you can kind of see through the last days through, I believe, some injuries and some sicknesses from some of the players, and was constantly subbing in to assist, as well as helping push her own team into the finals to try and, win it all. So I think that deserves a lot of commendation. And again, I think, I have a lot to say about the other two as well. Grace and Disco, in my opinion, did really, really well. I think Grace was having to play at a higher level, and that was a struggle. And to her credit, she did very well. She played 3 hits against people I would consider being tough to play against, and was fending them off, in my opinion, very, very well. So I think it bears mentioning that, even though I saw that allegedly statistically she was the lowest valuable player, I vastly disagree with that statement. And it's a part of why, like with Jarrett, I don't feel relying on stats as a whole is a good idea. But that's my quick and short of the spiel.
Yeah.
I'm sure more later.
Absolutely. We're going to talk. This is a precursor to what conversation is going to occur on the show. As you can tell, if you're listening, my co-hosts hate statistics, and I'm going to be the champion of stats. I definitely think stats have a lot of validity in even this tournament and in tournaments in the past. And I obviously got a lot wrong, but we all got some things wrong, and we'll have a discussion towards the end of the show. I think it's a big one coming about how much do you use stats when thinking about players, and what are they good for? We'll talk about that throughout the show tonight. But I am going to use a little bit of statistics in my thing that I was right about, and this is validating that Evil Hate on Me is a total badass in his own arena. He placed number 2 MVP of the tournament. He won 6 of his 7 commander games. He was on the second place team, I believe, team number 3. So he didn't come out fully on top, and unfortunately he wasn't able to even finish out the tournament, I don't think, which is really disappointing. But that's even more reason to call him out, and just he was on a complete I'm forgetting the word, a complete tear. He was on a complete tear this tournament, and I hope it was validating for him, because he was the most dominant New York player in this tournament, in my opinion. Something that we all got wrong. I'm happy to start on this one. When describing Assassin in the predictions episode, I described him as passive support player, and I was very wrong about that. Assassin has a total dog in him. He was breaking into enemy back lines, wrecking face, being a total playmaker, playing extremely well, and obviously won the tournament, shoved it in my face. Assassin, I'm sorry, I was very wrong about you. In my defense, the only times I can really think of that I'm remembering Assassin playing was in the St. George Funsies event in 2021 and East Coast 2017. So I was using some outdated data. Turns out Assassin is real good. It's at least in his home arena. So well played, Assassin. Joe, how about you? What were you wrong about?
So, as almost an inverse to Jarrett, I was actually wrong, very much so, about Strikva. I thought that James would perform well in the arena, but I even told James that I had James initially rated at a layer lower. I had James put into the D tier. I knew kind of in the back of my head that Syracuse would play well to some of James's strengths and understandings, but I didn't know how quickly James would pick up the arena or how well that performance would be, especially when it came to players against the same level. To which, honestly, all I can say is that James exceeded the expectations that I did have and absolutely proved that the C tier is where James should have absolutely been placed. There's still, definitely some stuff to work on, just like everybody. But James showed James had an incredible showing. So, Jarrett?
Hey. Hello. The thing that I got wrong is another feel selection. I got lost in the... Give me 1 second. Goodness. I needed to drink some water. I couldn't speak. My throat was dry.
Gulp, gulp. Gulp, gulp.
I got lost in the fact of... Shut up. I got lost in the sense of skill. The team specifically that I got wrong, and I fully admit, is Team Rhea. I saw the first three names on that list, Beans, Josiah, and Rhea, and went, this team's got it. It's over. And I thought that it would work for them as far as the randomizer, but I was completely wrong. The randomizer and the human element are some of the most unpredictable things as far as those tournaments go. And as far as laser tech goes, that's why random randoms are so much fun, because there is such an unpredictability in any of those games. I mean, Beans being hurt also did not help that team in any way. But I don't fault Beans for anything as far as that tournament went. I fault nobody. It's just that human element is so hard to predict. And it's so hard to master how to predict how it's going to work. And even the randomizer is so hard to predict. It's impossible to predict, actually.
Yeah, true that. Joe, what was your surprise from this tournament?
So to again kind of go off of Jarrett's, Aiden's team was a bit of a shock for me. I thought that they would perform, but I was worried about a lot of potential synergy issues. Besides really Cayman and Aiden, that was a team that, while there were three New Yorkers, who knows how well they were going to mesh together, as well as Ender, who, from our understanding, this is their first tournament out from California. I had no idea what the initial synergy was going to look like. And so I had them kind of placed a little bit lower. And watching through day one, it did feel... I kind of was thinking, yep, I think I was right about this one. I think the synergy is kind of messing with them a little bit. And then day two, I have no idea what happened overnight, but it looked like an entirely different team. It looked like they were getting, whether it was roles or not, it looked like they were being a lot more coordinated and working together a lot more. and playing off of one another a lot better. And that team, top to bottom, just looked much, much more impressive synergy-wise than I anticipated.
Jarrett, what about you?
I'm gonna be honest with you. My surprise is just about the same as Joe's. That team's synergy clicked just out of nowhere, and I couldn't have saw that coming. And the team that didn't synergize as well as I thought they would is Team Rhea. So I completely flipped who I thought would synergize and who I thought wouldn't. Who wouldn't. I completely got lost in, again, skill and the fact that Team Rhea had 3 super, super talented and super good players that just couldn't synergize and couldn't communicate, and that entire team just couldn't. But also, I'm going to speak for everyone in James. This tournament truly showed how talented James is at laser tag. James is such an incredible player, and he showed at this tournament.
Yeah, James. Yeah. Yeah, this has been the Loveland James Playbook podcast. Please come back next week for more information about Strictva. Okay, the first thing far and away that I wrote down for my surprise when I was writing notes was Ender, WTF, in all caps. So I'm going to just pull up some little stat digging I did. Now, to be honest, I think Ender may have more than one card. So I looked at his card on LF Stats and on the Laserforce global website. It says he has 250 missions total that he's been playing. It looks like he played about 50 SM5 missions in Lost Worlds since late 2023. And then Syracuse was like his main place that he's gotten to go. His first tournament. He has just about as many games in Syracuse now as in Lost Worlds, according to this. I imagine that somewhere out there's more games that he's played before, but just the fact that I know you guys don't believe in MVP, but he was top half MVP if it's rounds, finals, or either, or both. Like he was supposedly the least powerful player on this team when determining the ranks, and he was completely overlooked. Now, part of it, I will give Ender some credit. Apparently, he was very smart, and Aiden told me that in preparing for this tournament, Ender listened to this podcast, all the episodes that Aiden and I did, so Ender put in the work to at least get some knowledge together in preparation, but still, I am completely blown away. Say whatever you want about, the game state and the position that he was in. Like, he was playing against some of the best players in the world, and he totally held his own. Out of nowhere. Where's this guy been? What the heck is going on? Ender, if you watch this or listen to this, you better message me. I want to interview you. This is crazy. What a surprise.
Woohoo! Go
No, that's fair.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So why don't we, we've been, all of our surprise was Team 2, which won the tournament. I'm going to, as we go through each team, I'm going to let everyone know how we predicted these teams and where they placed. And then let's just fire away and talk about the story of it. Let's continue on with team number 2. Our consensus was we had them in last place. So that is about as wrong as you could possibly get. Actually, it is as wrong as you could possibly get. But Joe was the highest on them, to be fair. Joe had them at 4th. So, Joe, good job. We'll have to give you the win on that one.
Woohoo!
Yeah. Honestly, what a lot of when I had initially ranked them on was I was kind of banking a lot on the Odin Cayman synergy, as well as kind of like you said, Assassin's ability to support them. And from what I understood, the rest of the team's ability to just kind of follow through.
Dude, they supported Assassin.
Again, again, it kind of was a lot stronger than I initially had even thought. And so it's, you know, it's also a statement to how these events go, that it is also very important about positions being pulled. But it's also very hard to rate people who you may not always know, you know, who they are. We had never seen Ender in a tournament. We had never seen Hallinge in a tournament. We had met Ebo Mike and Anchovy in Loveland, as well as some of the Californians knew who they were, so we had kind of an idea of where they were. But it does make, as far as I'm aware, I've never met either Stealth Elf or Alex Boxes, who Cody commented on the last video that that is true. It's not supposed to be Alex.
I still want to call him
Boxes.
Alex Bones. I still want to call him that.
Because apparently he is the person who comes in and boxes up all of the windows for them. So they would make a joke. They would say Alex Boxes, and that became their code name. I think this team, top to bottom, performed very well. Like I said, that first day seemed like it was a little bit rough, maybe some growing pains, but the second through fourth days, they seemed very in sync with one another. So
the stupid thing about this team, and I'm going to call this team stupid multiple times. It's stupid because, one, Cayman and Odin were locked into resupply for like 90% of the tournament. I'm exaggerating like slightly, but honestly, it was like every single game, one or both of them were on resupply. So they didn't even get the chance to go out and like carry the team. It was the other four that were doing so much of the heavy lifting. Like top to bottom, this team was insane. And the other thing that's stupid about this is we give the New Yorkers in Detroit a lot of crap for not always traveling a lot, right? That's been a thing in the tournament scene. And so one of the things that you hope for is when you get like 30 people, sorry, not 30, more like 20. When you get like 20 people coming out that travel all around the world, practicing in different arenas, you would hope that it would teach the New Yorkers a lesson that all these worldly experienced players would come into their arena and kick their butts and incentivize them, hey, you got to go play in other arenas in order to become really good at Space Marines. No, that didn't happen at all. All these New Yorkers that I've never even heard of just straight up outplayed all my friends that I've been playing with for the last 10 years. It's insane. Who's Alex Boxes? I don't know, but apparently he can beat up on half the world's best laser tag players. Stealth Elf, 2-0 hit diff on world champions, like, and Ender I've already talked about, and you know, I've seen Assassin before a little bit, but Assassin was just totally broke out and outperformed my expectations. So just F me. You guys way outperformed my expectations without even needing your top two quote unquote players. And then when Cayman did come out onto the field, or Odin did come out onto the field, holy cow, they had pent up aggression. They were ready to just let them have it. I think Kodama was obviously pretty disappointed with the outcome of Nats, and if there was any doubt that he's in contention to be the best player in the US, like this is some proof that he might just be that, because his games where he got to actually be unleashed were insane. So well played, all of Team 2. I was as wrong as possible about you, and I admit it.
Well, this team absolutely surprised me. I had them down in 5th. Because, I mean, I didn't know 3 of these players. I'd never even heard of these 3. Ember. Pull up the list of names here. Sorry. Terrible at names, if anyone in here couldn't tell. Total bad at names. I mean, Alex, Stealth, and Ender. I had no clue who these 3 were, and holy crap. I want to play against them as soon as possible.
Yeah. Come out.
Like, if they came out next time, they would bring so much fun to our Mega Members nights. That'd be a lot of fun, because it's 3 players that showed up and showed out. And I mean, even Assassin, holy crap. Holy cow, this team was so good. And Kodama and Odin, like, 2 of the best players I've ever played against. even when they were the resupplies together, those two's synergy is absolutely incredible, and it's absolutely stupid.
Stupid. It's a stupid
those
team.
Two can communicate better than... It is a stupid team that I thought would not do as well as they did, and I was so wrong. I was so incredibly wrong. A home arena advantage to, like, 3 Californias, 3 New Yorkers. Goodness, what a nasty combo that we did not realize would be so nasty.
I don't blame our process at all. Like, if you look at that tier 4, Alex Boxes versus who would you rather have on your team? Alex Boxes, a guy that we've never heard of, who's just playing in his home arena, or Disco Monkey, who's been playing in like every tournament for the past 10 years, or Disco Stu, world champion, or how about Fox on the Syracuse A team in his home arena? Like, it just, these guys blew the process of selection out of the water. Anyway, all right, I'm done ranting. Stupid team.
The next place team, we were closer on as a group. Jarrett got correct in general. I had them ranked 1 higher. Luke had them ranked 1 lower, which was Team Golden Pony, which was Baden, Evil, Golden Pony, Disco Monkey, Autumn, and Anchovy. That team, in my opinion, performed basically about where I thought they would. I definitely thought they could take it. There's, Baden's talent is nothing to overlook. Like you even said, Evil's talent in his home arena is nothing to overlook. From what I had heard, Golden Pony was a really, really good player. You can never deny, the synergy of the Helmuths. Disco and Autumn being together makes them, honestly, in my opinion, a lot scarier. And Anchovy, even though it's his first event, we had seen him come out. He had a lot of heart for the game when he was playing. It was really exciting to see. And I do think he proved that he is... I don't want to say capable of learning, because I think that's the incorrect way to say it, but that he is going to grow more as a player as he continues to play.
Yeah, this team was cracked for sure. The top 3 players were great. The bottom 3 players were really solid. Like even Anchovy. If I wasn't going to talk about Ender as my unexpected thing from the tournament, I had Anchovy next in line to talk about. I remember meeting him the one time this last summer, I think, and he's young. I think he's like 13 or 14 years old. But I was watching him on the cameras this tournament, and the dude was just like running in, flushing out teams. He's picking up the game really quickly. So top to bottom, this team was really great.
I mean, this team performed exactly how I thought they would. I knew that this was going to be a solid team, and I knew that it would have some faults, which, I mean, every team on this list definitely had their faults. But this team was arguably one of the most solid throughout the tournament. Brew and Evil, absolutely incredible, absolutely nasty top 2 right there. Golden Pony showed up when it was needed. And, I mean, Golden Pony played an absolutely incredible tournament. The Helmuths, those 2 I've been playing against for so long, and they always find new ways to get you. Like, they find ways to pick at you because they just communicate so well. They communicate even without communicating half the time that I'm against them.
Unless you sneak up
behind them. I don't even
understand
it.
Then they can't. Then you can't.
There it is. I was waiting for it, Luke. And holy cow, Anchovy. Such a young player, such a young talent. I mean, this kid is picking things up fast. And it's another player. Like, all of these New Yorkers, I didn't even really get to play against when they were here this summer because I got sat during that match.
Get wrecked.
Jacko was so sad. But like, I want to play against these New Yorkers now because they've showed up and they showed out and they're so good. And they're such good people. Like, come out to Colorado, guys. It would be so much fun to have those New Yorkers here and Anchovy to come back with the California. Like, this team was so good and they're such good people. And I mean, what a solid second place team.
For sure.
I request that the Golden Pony reveal themselves and fight us.
I agree.
So the third place team, we again, so we got this one right as
That
a
was
consensus.
our consensus. Yeah.
Yeah, we got this one right as a consensus. Jarrett was correct again. Luke had them placed one lower. I had them placed one higher. But this was Team Strikva, which was the 10-10-9, DK, Strikva, Disco Stew, Ace, and Grak. And, you know, so I think, unfortunately, I believe Ace got hurt either on the second or the third day it was. I know that they weren't able to play out the finals, and it sounds like it was due to some kind of injury from what I was hearing. Or maybe it was sickness, but they just were unable to play. And honestly, I think this team did really good. Like I said earlier in the podcast, I think, you know, Grace did pull a lot of heavy games. Statistically, she pulled over half of her games as 3 hits, and in my opinion, performed very well against the players that she had to play, because it was rare that she got someone in 1 or even 2 tiers just above her. A lot of the time, you know, it was Snuffles or Caleb or, you know, it was Baden or Aiden or Cayman. Like, it's these players who are a lot higher level. And I just kind of would watch her for several minutes, just kind of like as if she had a fly swatter, just swinging at them, basically, and just keep punching them every time they'd try and come into the resupply. And then, you know, with Ace's injury, they picked up Autumn for the last day a lot. And the sisters there were several games I watched the two of them pull either resupply together or 3-hit and resupply together. And they made a lot of attackers' lives difficult. To call out a game, there was one they played against Caleb's team in particular, where Caleb pulled commander, I believe it was, against Grace Heavy, and Britton was his commander. And you could see for about 2 minutes, Caleb just run forward and get downed, either by Grace or by Autumn. And then run forward and get downed again, run forward and get downed again. And eventually Caleb left and fought in the midfield and had to come back with Britton in order to shove them out because Caleb needed the assistance. So I think it's a testament to how well she was doing, but not just to even highlight her team did very well. You know, DK was performing very, very well. I believe, you know, Cody was performing. He only got a couple of 3-hit games, but when he did, he really was able to strut his stuff. James, in my opinion, outperformed what my expectations were, like I said. So I think, again, this team deserves a lot of props. So,
I mean, if you look at this team, there's not a player on this team that finished in the top 6. That just shows you how solid this team was. James, I could compliment James all day on this tournament. Like, it's absolutely incredible.
This is the Strikva
DK,
podcast.
so much knowledge. The Strikva podcast.
good name for it.
DK, like, the wealth of knowledge DK has showed in this tournament and with this team. Cody, absolutely incredible player. Had some faults this tournament, but overall played incredibly. Grak, I don't believe Grak was the lowest ranking person in this tournament by any notion. Like, Grak played so well against players that are, like, statistically so much better, and Grak made them look like they weren't. Again, that's the human effect. Grak showed us what the human effect is this entire tournament. Like, the ability to, as Joe said, push Caleb back. Grak and Autumn, like, to be able to push somebody of that caliber back is nuts. Disco Stew. I love Stew. Another solid tournament from Stu. Like, I have no complaints. Like, what a solid player. And I mean, in that fourth tier, like, there's nobody I'd rather take than either of the Discos. Ace played incredible. I hope, Ace, you heal up or feel better, depending on if you're injured or sick, but you played a heck of a tournament. Like, I'm going to say like about 1,000 times.
Because you like them.
I love everybody that was at this tournament. But this team did exactly what I thought they would. They did everything I thought they would. I knew that people would overestimate Grak, and Grak is such an incredible player. Again, the human element is very much a thing in laser tag. And it's very, very much a thing. And Grak was so underestimated throughout this tournament and so overlooked that it made me sad. Grak played a heck of a tournament, and people need to, like, understand that. The Helmuths are such an incredible group of people, and they're such a talented group. I just hate that they get overlooked so much. So props to Grak, props to that team. What an incredible showing.
That was well said. Yeah, this team had a lot of synergistic players on it. I liked seeing this mix of maturity and talent. Honestly, like, a lot of players who tend to be more farming oriented regardless, like just in their play style, coming together and like it clearly works synergistically. I'm still a little questionable about like who Ace the player really is, but and I got some stats here that, like, you know, it seems like it seems like Ace was appropriately ranked. That's all I'm gonna say. Just
Stats man's here.
Just came out and played some tag and had a few spike games here and there, but on the whole performed a little lower compared to most people. But so when I put this team a little lower, I mentioned Stu and Grek's physicality, and here's the thing. In Loveland this last year, there were like 5 or 6 people that had a really hard time in our arena because, like, first of all, we make you go 200,000 miles up in elevation, so you can't breathe, and then we make you run up and down steep ramps the whole game. And it severely affected some people's ability to play the arena super well or play it without being in severe pain the whole time. That's our home field advantage. That's us trying to ruin laser tag for everybody so we can win. But one of the things I think I actually decided in watching this that Syracuse has to be my favorite arena. And it's not because I personally enjoy playing with it, but it's because it completely opens up the game for everybody to win based purely on their laser tag skill. You know, just the floor is easy to run on. I do love that. You don't have to have like these iron legs to be able to play in this arena. It's straight. It's just one floor, like tall and short, whatever your height, doesn't really matter. Everybody has the same advantage in this arena. It's laid out in a, I'm going to call it kind of a simplistic way, just a big rectangle. You start on opposite ends and you just go, and your starting base is right next to you. Like, this arena lays it out really simple for high quality Space Marines. It's kind of like, I like watching football, and sometimes once in a while it's fun when one team is forced to go up north and play in a giant blizzard. Like, okay, the team that's the home team has an advantage. It's kind of fun to watch one team face the elements, but you don't get high quality football when you force people to play in a blizzard or in a hurricane or in high wind conditions or with the sun in their eyes, things like that. Syracuse feels like an indoor football arena. Syracuse feels like no matter who you are, you come in and you get to actually show your stuff because they take away all the weird BS X factors. And anyways, I apologize for what I said about Stu and Greg because I may have overcompensated for something I didn't consider about the Loveland Arena. They played fantastic here. And Jarrett said a lot of great things about Greg. I actually want to, I'm more of a stats guy. I have some Greg stats. I have
Greg stats.
The truth is that there's a number of games where Greg got beat by the other team, fair and square. They just outplayed her. But I got 3 heavy games right here, 2 of which that Greg's team won, where she got a 6.5K heavy game against Caleb's team. She got a 5K heavy game against Caleb's team, and her team won. And she got a 6K heavy game against the Sweets team, and they barely lost that game. I was really enjoying these Greg heavy games. Like, she's got a really brilliant mind as far as positioning, and I like stats, and Greg put up good stats. So, yay. And the team obviously, it was questionable their placement. They could have placed lower, but they didn't. They won the games at the right times because they had a really flexible team that could deal with a bunch of different lineups, and I think this was a great placement for them.
Agreed. I think they all performed rather well. Next up, we had Team 6, which was the consensus ranking again, but mostly because Luke
saved us, guys.
A lot of faith that Jarrett and I did not quite have. This was the Team Jackal No Lives is what they called themselves. But this was Caleb, Britton, Jackal, Fox, Lil Bit, and Evil Mike. Even for 4th place, I think this team performed really, really well. They had some really good powerhouses with it, as well as, in my opinion, some pretty good draws. Caleb got Commander a lot during the tournament, which is, if I recall, his favorite position inside of Syracuse as well. And so it was a lot of good pressure, and I think the team did really good about synergizing it. Watching this team, it really felt like a much more aggressive team, which I think suited a lot of the play style they were kind of revolving around, where they didn't really play these, like they did almost do every game 2 time or close to, but it did feel like a lot of the skirmishes were very in your face on the other team's side. It did feel very aggressive watching them from at least a viewer's standpoint. So
yeah, I had a lot of faith in this team, and I don't blame my process for New Yorkers. And if you look at some of the other teams, if you were from New York, you pretty much outperformed expectations. The New Yorkers really dominated their home site in this tournament. But the truth is that if we're looking at MVP, Jackal and Fox placed within their rank, and Britton and Little Bit placed a little below their rank. And I was kind of banking on their natural synergy, the home field advantage, but I mean, they had their ceiling games. I think they beat pretty much every team at different points. Absolutely. And you had the games where Little Bit or Evil Mike were popping off, but unfortunately it just didn't roll the right way, and I think they might have had some... I'm going to look at the finals matchups because I feel like there might have just been some bad rolls.
Jarrett, while Luke's pulling stats.
Okay, stats man. This team, I mean, I had them where? 5th? 6th? I forget. I had them last. So they definitely exceeded my expectation. Caleb getting the draws that he wanted, and his team. Britain, unfortunately, underperforming didn't help too much. Made it pretty hard. Jackal, great player. I think deserves a little more praise. Where Jackal didn't always get the roles that he wanted, he was able to perform those roles to what was expected. And that is sometimes hard to do consistently, and Jackal was able to do it pretty consistently. Jackal definitely placed higher than I thought he would. Like, this kid's got talent. This kid's got skill. And when he was down here in Colorado, I mean, he's just a fun, bubbly person to be around. And it makes me happier knowing that he exceeded my expectation. Little Bit and Ebo Mike did worse than I thought they were going to. Not a dig at any of them. I was expecting a lot more from those two. And even Fox, I was expecting a little more than what happened from Fox. So this team just kind of it exceeded expectation for me, but in some spots it did where I thought it would be, if that makes sense.
I have their finals games
to
here.
Really quickly,
what would you like
to really quickly interject? As a joke, to make it very clear, clearly the first initial iteration with Britain in the C tier was correct, considering where he ended up statistically. Not actually how I think it was, but it was amusing to me to find out that Britain was, instead of being in the top 12, in the top 18 initially. So just made me chuckle a little.
Was that a contention?
So there was a lot of joking in the initial one that Britain being in C was a steal. And then when Scythe dropped and they moved, I believe they moved Snuffles up a rank. And then they put Britain up a rank as well. Britain went into the B tier instead of being in the C tier, and then ended up statistically in the C tier, compared to Jackal, who ended in the B tier. So I just thought that was...
Oh,
and I mean, it's also, again, random draw on stats. It's
right.
not
Stats are BS. I know.
Stats are good, and we'll discuss this later. But I think they're too relied upon.
We'll talk about this later, dear.
Yes.
And you will have to tell me about any of the fun drama that happens on Facebook, because I haven't been on Facebook for months. So any of the, if there were like old charts or anything, you gotta let me in on the jokes. I'm old. But I do have no lives from Jackal. Their finals games, they did defeat Team Assassin in finals with an Ender Commander and Assassin Heavy. They rolled a little bit heavy and Ebo Mike Commander, and they beat Team Assassin, like with Ebo and a little bit on 3-hit. The next game came and just got heavy and destroyed everybody in a matter of like 5 minutes. I don't know if either of you saw that game, but the game was over within like 2 minutes. It was crazy. And then in the second finals game against Team Strikva, again, Little Bit and Ebo Mike rolling 3-hit, and they beat Team Strikva. It's just in the second game, Cody and DK dropped 20k on them and got their revenge. So, even like some of the worst rolls this team could have got, and they still, like, Little Bit and Ebo Mike won the 2 games that they were both 3-hits together. Like, this team still had an incredible showing even at their floor. So well done to all of them.
Yeah, that the Strikva game where it was Little Bit versus Strikva was very stressful to watch, as I'm trying to cheer on Strikva. Watching Little Bit drop 2 wonderful nukes that gets, I believe it was Disco Stew, basically killed out from 14 to 0 lives, or maybe it was Autumn. And Strikva is holding almost 3. I think it was Autumn. Okay.
Oh, he was
and
stacking.
Cyril was holding almost 3, and then dropped 2 of them. And Disco Stew as his heavy managed to missile out a little bit, killing her, which I think was their only saving grace because they were dead at that point. So again, big credit to that team because they had some games that were, to the margin.
James, get your bases. What are you doing? Stacking. Come on, I taught you better than that.
We'll be having talks about that.
Oh, we're gonna have talks.
James also to the Strigva Hate podcast.
On the
So,
Strigva podcast.
There's a lot to talk about.
Let's move on.
There's a lot to talk about. So the next team is Team 1, which was Team Sweets. So we have Snuffles, Hammer, Sweets, Satyrs, Azra, and Minette. I don't think got this one right. Or no, we did. We did get this one right as a consensus. Luke had them very highly ranked. I had them very lowly ranked, and Jarrett had them one above where they placed.
Woohoo!
So Luke, if you want to lead off of this.
If anything, this does show that consensus rankings are good. All 3 of our ways of thinking are just a little bit right enough that combined we did the best. Better than any of our individual opinions. Yeah, maybe I should start because I placed them so high. The reason I thought this team would do well is the reason why Team 2 did really well. Team 2, with Kodama, Odin, and all them, like no matter what lineup you got, their team was really solid. Not like just average, but like really solid. And I thought that Team 1 would be kind of that way, where no matter what lineup you had, they were a force to be reckoned with. I have memories of Hammer being this complete dominant solo carry player after playing against him in like 2016, 2021. I saw him in Detroit too, but I think he took a bit of a dip there in 2019. And Sweets and Snuffles had their ceiling games. I got to watch Satyrs, Azra, and Minette all have great games on Commander and Heavy throughout the tournament. But, I mean, unfortunately, I just kept seeing games where 1 or 2 players would really underperform, like a lot of scout scores in the 3,000s or commander scores in the 5,000s. And it just seemed like I got outplayed a number of times and unfortunately fell pretty low in the tournament. But they did definitely have their games where they popped off and they could smack anybody in the face with the right lineups.
Yeah, I agree. To talk over Jarrett, basically. I think this team had...
I'm used to it.
I think this team had some interesting dynamics, and I think the big thing initially when I had rated them was I was really worried about what the synergy would look like. Snuffles and Sweets have played together on several occasions. We know that Sammy is a rather talented player up and coming in our arena, but it's a first time in their arena. Sadie has always performed to expectations, and I think she's been there once or twice. Hammer is a wonderful player in their arena from what my understanding was, and Minette is a very reliable, experienced player, especially when it comes to resupply and scout. In my opinion, she has a lot of understanding of what she needs to do. So I thought that a lot of this team was going to come down to what polls got made in terms of synergy, and I think that was kind of to the point of what I had thought about Team 2, where they would have issues with synergy. I thought that perhaps the same thing would occur here, where there would be maybe some, not like anger, but some synergy, disagreements on play styles, what moves to make next, where people are, misunderstanding what the needs of each other were. And again, wasn't in the arena, so I have no idea how true any of this is. But it did just seem like they struggled to act as a full unit, if that makes sense. So
do I get to talk now?
Moving on to Team 5.
Yeah. Okay.
What you got, son?
Well, this team did a little worse than I expected, that's for sure. Snuffles and Sweets, I was expecting both to be pretty close to the top 6, if not in the top 6. And Sweets didn't hold up to where I wanted him to. And Snuffles fell out of the top 6, which was absolutely a surprise for me. Both of those two players are absolutely incredible people. It just, again, like I've said, the human effect is very much a thing, and those two are another prime example of very difficult to go to a tournament outside of your state and outside of your comfort zone, especially a randomizer, and be able to do things as successfully as you want to 100% of the time, 100% of the game, stuff like that. And another example of that is Satyrs. I had Satyrs doing pretty decently this tournament, and I mean, this team had absolutely their bright moments, some fantastic games, but the bad outweighed the good for Team Sweets here, and it just unfortunately didn't work out for them in the end.
And to kind of go over, again, we'll talk about this later. Statistically, it's interesting because Luke has made us a color-coded chart that shows where everyone fell, whereas Hammer was rated in the top 12 in terms of tiers, but during the tournament, statistically, fell to the top 24. And then Satyrs was ranked in the top 24.
Top 18.
And top 18, sorry. Is that top 18? Because he's...
Green is top 18.
Hammer fell to yellow. Hammer's in yellow.
Oh, sorry.
So
I have a separate one where I included finals, and he's in top 18. But you're right. In round play, Hammer is top 24. My bad.
Yes, no, it's okay. And I mean, again, statistically, then Satyrs falls into the F tier with a couple other players. Do I think that's necessarily where they lie in terms of skill? No. But I do think that is indicative of kind of a random draw effect. It can be hard to synergize as well as to kind of perform to the level that you should if you're having a tough one. So
let's move on to the final team. What do you guys think?
Disappointed. Jarrett and I thought very highly of this team, and Luke was a doubter, and it turns out Luke was right. Off by one.
I wish I wasn't.
Yeah, last place was Team Rhea, which was Beans, Fear Turkey, Rhea, Jerome, Raz, and Hallange is how I've been told it's supposed to be said. This team, I was very worried about synergy, as well as we kind of talked about Beans's, injury. Was his arm going to be back to healed? Is he okay? How's it going? It sounded like Beans was still recovering when the tournament began, or was under some kind of injury. Also, apparently, I just remembered this. Shout out to Caleb. It sounded like on day 2, Caleb sustained some kind of smaller injury and kind of powered through it. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I remember Fox saying something on his post that Caleb was not at 100%. So again, kudos to him. This team is, I thought they would perform at least to a little higher in terms of having not so swingy of games, having their floor and their ceiling being the closest, in my opinion, of all of the teams. But it just kind of looked like, again, synergy just could not quite hit.
You go ahead, Jared. I'm trying to find a certain game to talk about this team with.
Oh boy, Stats Man's looking for stats.
Mm-hmm.
I was so disappointed in this team. Like, not of the people on this team, just how it played out. Rhea underperformed, which is unfortunate. But my saying through this entire podcast, just change my code name to Human Effect. it's just unfortunate to see it play out how this did, because Jerome did better than expected and Rhea did worse, and you would hope that would balance out, but it just didn't. It wasn't enough to overcome what seemed like some communication issues, just some skill things that fell through. And I mean, this team is another example of the human effect. Like, the top 3 on this team are all incredible players. Josiah, world champion, Rhea, world champion. And I mean, wherever Beans goes, Beans usually dominates. And it fell apart so fast. It started to look strong, like at the beginning, and then the wheels just, it looked like all the wheels popped and the car just sat there. Like I said, nothing against the people on this team, but this team just, it fell flat. It rolled over and died.
I also think it bears mentioning that they did. I think it was more so a conflict of play styles than anything else. If I had to guess, not having been in the arena, like you said, all of these players are very talented. With even like you said, Halland, Raz, and Jerome all played according to stats to a tier higher than what they were rated on. And so it was definitely, it felt a lot more like a synergy problem than anything else. Like play styles were a little harder, maybe call outs were a little rougher. And, again, that comes into play, especially with random draws. You have potentially multiple different play styles in effect. And if you can't get them to sync up, it doesn't matter,
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Trying to buy time for Luke to get his game.
I got my games. I got my 2.
You figured it?
Okay, good.
Believe it or not, I also include some feels and some instinct and some human effect in my analysis as well. And
Whoa.
here's partially why I put this. Honestly, one of the biggest reasons is because, I get to play with Josiah a lot. You guys do too. And despite Josiah being the bona fide, everyone agrees, @1 player at our site, I beat Josiah quite a lot. I beat Josiah. I feel like I've, at least in the past 6 months, I've beaten him more than he's beaten me. And the reason that works in general is because when I play against Josiah, I try to fight everybody except Josiah. Like, why would I fight him? He's better than me, so I'm just going to go attack his team. And Josiah, he has a tendency to come out of games complaining about how he couldn't get shots or that his team fell apart or something. And I think that may have sometimes been the issue with this team. I'm looking at a game here. This game just told the whole story for me. It was one of the round play games against Team No Lives from Jackal. It was Josiah Commander and Beans Heavy versus Caleb Commander and Fox Heavy. It seemed like this is about as good of a lineup as you can get for this team. Ray was on medic. Maybe it would have been better if she were a scout, but still. They're playing, and then you can see that right around the halfway mark, 3 players all die at the exact same time. I don't know what happened.
I know what happened.
What happened?
So Caleb dropped a double nuke. Whatever was going on in the back line, Rhea as a medic was just hemorrhaging lives constantly, and the ammo was not getting any resupplies during this time because they were just kind of getting bounced around. And so Caleb dropped a double nuke. The first one killed the ammo. The second one killed Rhea, and the scout followed, I believe, a second or two afterwards to a stray shot. And so all of a sudden, the game went from looking relatively even to there's almost no chance. Josiah had Two Nukes as well had caught up to Caleb, who was, I believe, a little ahead for most of it, and Caleb just dropped first, and it ended up killing basically Josiah's whole team, which hamstrings almost any player. If your medic, ammo, and a scout all go at once, there's not a lot left to do.
It just echoed kind of that same story that sometimes happens, and the team wasn't able to function without Josiah or Beans carrying them in this game in particular, I suppose. But if they weren't doing it, then in the other games, who was carrying the team? Who was making the big plays? I look at Team 5 and Team 2, and before the tournament, I would have said that the bottom 4 players look pretty even to me. Assassin, Alex, Boxes, Stealth, Elf, and Ender, or Rhea, Jerome, Raz, and Halang. I wouldn't have seen a difference pre-tournament, but it turns out that the first group of New Yorkers and the random Cali player, really great synergy. Maybe it was a personality thing. Maybe they are more skilled. The second group just did not seem like it was working. Like there was not a synergy. And unfortunately, it ended in a lot of underperformances. Yeah, I mean, I saw a number of games where like maybe Beans or Josiah would get a really high score, but there wasn't momentum from anybody else on the team. So yeah, that's disappointing.
Hey, that one game I happened to watch live, so that's why I have the answers for that one. I did not sadly get to catch them all live. I don't know if they've all been uploaded or if they're all even going to be, because I know I saw that the finals day got posted. I hope they get uploaded, because I would like to see the games that I missed, but I don't know. I'm actually checking right now if they got uploaded. Yeah, it looks like day 1 through 4 got posted. So excited to watch back and see kind of maybe what I might have missed in terms of performances, especially, and see maybe where we're kind of talking out our butts here because we don't know, because we didn't get to catch every game.
Oh yeah, I didn't get to catch every game. I was looking between therapy sessions as often as I could.
Yeah, same. I was between battery installs and moments that I could sneak away. I was checking that and checking it out.
But all I'm saying is, when you got the Bagel Commander Beans Heavy, like you got to win those games. That was your ceiling, and they weren't able to pull it out. And if they can't make that work, then that's why a lot of the other lineups weren't working.
Sure.
All right, stats. What beef you guys got with my stats?
So first of all, I think that stats are something that you can use. I think stats are something you can use to help you understand where players are at. However, I've had multiple talks with a lot of people over the years that I do think stats are too heavily relied upon, as well as, in my opinion, perhaps some of the incorrect stats are really relied upon, which is in terms of especially MVPs. A lot of people lean very heavily into MVPs to determine how well a player did. When, especially when it comes to a random draw, there's a lot of factors that go into it, kind of like Jared's saying with the whole human effect, but there's also matchmaking. You could have a team that is incredibly powerful match against a team that is not as powerful. What the less powerful team rolls better positions and beats the other one, right? You also could have one player who does statistically better against another player roll a matchup, and suddenly the performances get a little skewed. And so I do think that it's something to keep in mind when remembering, because I do think there were a lot of great performances in this tournament, but like we've said, there are people who ended, in my opinion, lower than they should have in terms of statistics, not necessarily because they were bad players, but because statistically they did not get the points to get MVPs. And one thing, when I was kind of thinking about this, in the way that I view player skills, is not just based off of the MVPs, but to use Rusty as a perfect example. One of the big things that I like to look at is I have 3 things that I care about. It's 1, your accuracy, 2, your hit differentials, and 3, how many positions can you play to at least a semi-effective role, which is why, like, I will never argue that Rusty is the best player in the world, or if not one of the best. It is, I don't think, a contest to say that, because I could see Rusty playing on a team as a medic and still performing to an insanely high level, right? But you know, how much of that like displays on stats, because we don't see a lot of Rusty resupply games, you know, but then we know that that's how that will come out. And so I think it's something where you do have to use it more as a floor to start putting the building blocks on. You have your stats and you can start putting pieces here because so and so is really good at synergizing with people, even if they don't play very often, or so and so is very good at, you know, taking control and helping lead a team. You know, I think there is a lot more that goes into it personality wise than talent wise, in my opinion. And so I firmly believe that while stats are something to watch, it's too heavily relied upon in our system.
All right. So, I am also a big person on stats. Like I said at the start, I'm trying to be a sports analyst / sports broadcaster. So stats are a big thing to me. But in a game like this, like Laser Tag, there is a difference in like a hockey goaltender being incredibly consistent every game and an average laser tag player playing. Something's always going to happen to the average laser tag player, whereas most of the time it's not to a high tier goaltender. The bigger difference is human effect. Again, I love that word. It's going to happen more to a laser tag player than it is to a goaltender, because statistically that goaltender is solid and he has proven it game after game after game in stats. No matter where they go, they aren't playing in like a different arena or something like that. That net and that crease are always the same thing to that goaltender. Whereas a laser tag player, you could play in different arenas and have different outcomes. And you could even go to the same arena 9 times out of 10, and something will go wrong. More than not. Like, as we've said, Josiah, top player in our, like, easily the top player in Loveland. And he just had a couple of weeks where he did not win a match, did not win a game. And that's the kind of thing that you have to take into account when talking about laser tag and looking at laser tag stats, is every arena is going to affect somebody differently and make mistakes happen that mostly normally wouldn't if they were at their home arena or at that arena in the past. Different players, different skill levels. Everyone's gotten better since they were last there. You have new players there since last time. Things are so different when statistically keeping track of laser tag compared to hockey.
Mm-hmm. I think to that credit as well, to interject before Luke goes, using Strikva as a great example, he and I had a lot of talks before they went out. And they had, you know, tons of questions. How does it play? What's it like? You know, is it really like this? What's going to happen? And I remember I was constantly telling them, because we were also talking, Sammy I was talking with as well, that I felt they would have a very interesting time there. I remember telling Strikva very clearly, this arena plays to a play style that you like, which is I'm going to go fast and I'm going to attack people. Whereas I remember mentioning that if they then had to go to Detroit, it might be a different story because Detroit is a lot more farming than it is. I'm going to go over, I'm going to push you downstairs like it is in our arena, and we're going to kill you all downstairs. In Detroit, it's almost worse to throw your opponents downstairs because it can be really hard to dig them out suddenly. You almost want them to stay upstairs. And so it's a really fine line to walk that I don't know that Strikva would have been able to handle. However, in the alternate, I feel like that's Azra's good thing. Azra is very good about taking ground and not necessarily farming, but not trying to forcibly push you out, more like push everyone back all at once so she has more targets to shoot. Whereas I felt like in Syracuse, she might struggle a little bit more. And you would then have a dynamic where, you know, the two of them in my mind were flipped. One would be good in one arena, one would be better in the other. And so I do agree that arena would definitely play a role in it. I have commented repeatedly that I wish I could have taken Strikva to one of the Utah tournaments, and I still want to take Strikva out to Laser Mania to play some Space Marines with people because I think they would be killer in that arena. I think they would push some people a lot harder than they would expect. And so I do definitely agree. Playstyle and arena layout definitely plays a part to it. I even commented that I feel like I am stronger in Detroit than I am in our arena because it plays to such a zone control farm play style that I am so comfortable with, rather than I'm going to run in and bash my head against you and try and shove you downstairs, right? So I think it is important to always note that the arena will affect a player's layout. And to throw one more thing out real fast, one thing that Josiah, Fear Turkey, had been talking with about a lot of people was that he felt that maybe he was the C tier player in Syracuse. And when you include the statistics, here we go, Josiah ends up in the B tier. So I think, like I had been telling Josiah, if you do listen to this, buddy, you definitely do deserve to be in that higher tier. And I think while, like Jarrett said, you had some rougher games in Loveland, I think you are able to perform to these requirements in other arenas. So,
and what I said to Josiah is, you are, like I said, probably one of the best players at our site, and you usually kick the crap out. So it's not a dig at you. You're an incredible. You're just more of a team-oriented player mode, which is incredible. You love teaching.
All right, Luke, we cut you off long enough. Defend yourself. How about you?
Well, everything that you guys have said is completely sound. Like, there's more to people and the game than statistics. I've never disagreed with this. I'm honestly like, what exactly are you guys arguing for? What changes would you like to see either in the community or in the way that Luke talks about players or whatever? Like, what are you trying to advocate for in all of this that you're saying?
All right, I'm gonna say this. I've said it before. Grak is such an incredible player, and so are all the Helmuths, and they are so underrated throughout this community, and so like underappreciated in this community that stats don't do them justice. They are such incredible players. With this human effect, they always exceed what people give them credit for. Grak, especially this tournament, exceeded everyone's expectations, and still the stats put Grak in last. I don't think that stats are completely sound in something like I think that oh man, what I had a point. I think that the stats cannot make up for the human effect, and that people need to stop relying 100% on stats and stuff like that for different.
And like to kind of piggyback on that, I could talk about, I agree, the Helmuths in particular as a family have been looked down on, in my opinion, so much. And I think it comes with this almost stigma that I don't know that I've ever seen them on an A team. Excuse me. And honestly, I could see a lot of them performing for a California A team. I could see a lot of them being very talented members on a team like that. One thing I had talked about a lot with Aiden was when I went out with the Loveland B team to Detroit, because I was going to teach at the time Trinity and Feeder and a couple of other players, and I took Izzy as well, and we were going to basically just kind of learn and practice that way and grow. The one person that was, in my opinion, the most frustrating heavy to fight against as another heavy was Autumn, because trying to dig her out of an area in the upstairs of Detroit was a nightmare, because she could just post up and control what momentum you were trying to do. And it was almost impossible to outthink her, and there's no way to outflank her because you would have to go downstairs. And so once she gets to that point where she's got you in front of her and she can control like that, it is very, very difficult to get through Autumn as a player. Disco has consistently shown, that he's got a lot of talent. When he came out here to play in our Nats, pushed, Strictva, who was rated higher than Disco was, in an away arena in Strictva's first tournament. Again, this is where I think sometimes people do feel a little too much compared to stats. It was, in my opinion, a little risky putting Strictva so high, because I think everybody looked and went, wow, this kid won Rookie of the Year, was an insanely talented commander on the B team. The A team was talking about they would have taken him. But this is Strictva's first tournament. This is an away tournament, no less. First away tournament. In an away arena that they have never been inside of before. They have no understanding of what the layout is. They've only heard us really talk about it. This performance could have gone very, very differently. And we've seen it go differently in the past, where players, rely on statistics from home sites. And all of a sudden you have players who are rated a lot higher than they should be, who perform a lot lower than the expectation is. And so I think it's one of those things where tempering expectations with stats is not a bad idea, but people will lean too heavily one way or the other into it to say this person's bad or this person's really good. And it just kind of lends itself to this, weird dichotomy where, if we want to go through it real fast, the top 6 were Cayman, Baden, Odin, Evil, Beans, and Caleb, right? The next 6 behind them are Snuffles, DK, Assassin, Golden Pony, Turkey, and Jackal. This isn't in perfect order, by the way. I just have the color chart with me. The next 6 are Cody, Britton, Strictva, Jerome, Ender, and Sweets, statistically. The next 6 are Hammer, Stealth, Disco Monkey, Autumn, Raz, and Fox. The next 6 then become Azra, Alex Bones, Disco Stew, Anchovy, Hallange, and Rhea. And then in the last 6, you have Satters, Minette, Ace, Grack, Able Mike, and Little Bit, right? Again, do I think that's where all of those players belong? No. But can I understand how it got there based off of draws? Sure. Because again, you can't just factor one player's talent into rating them. You have to... There's a lot. I could talk about this for hours, and I have spoken about this for hours with Aiden and several other people, trying to get my thoughts out. I've talked with DK about this extensively too. I just think that the problem is the statistics are relied upon too much when building a tournament like this, because it is truly a random draw. And, you're not always going to get Caleb drawing 10 commander games. Sometimes you're going to get Grace drawing 9 heavy games. And again, I think Grace performed really, really well. But imagine that even 5 of those heavy games then get spread out between their top 3, which is Cody, Strictva, DK. How different do some of those games look, right? And so it's it is a lot of human effect as well as random, right? It's hard to put numbers to faces and be accurate in tournaments like these. So again, credit as well to the people who tried to balance these. I don't disagree with a lot of the positions that a lot of people ended up with, and I can understand how they got there. But there were some that I looked at and I was like, this feels like someone looked at stats and went, wow, this player performs way, way better than they should, and rated them higher. And alternatively, as I've said from the beginning, I feel like Autumn...
Can I interrupt you?
Sure.
Cody told me that 5 people made a list top to bottom of the order of the players, and this is a consensus of 5 people's opinions.
Yes. So like I said, I'm not trying to despair. This is 5 different people rating from top to bottom. Sorry, I don't know if I mentioned that. I believe it was Cody, Josiah, Caleb, I think Kodama, and one other. I can't remember. And so they did get different opinions from different sources. It's not just like, all the New Yorkers came together to put this together, right? I don't know. And again, I said from the get-go, Autumn, in my opinion, has shown statistically that she performs well in this arena and is rated really, really low, and then proved exactly what we said she should be in a tier above. So. Sorry. Long rant. Lots to say.
For sure. I kind of joked at the beginning, there was an argument coming about stats, but to be honest, I still don't really disagree with anything you guys are saying. It's like this was I mean, I don't just look at people as directly correlated to their numbers, but I think there's a story behind the numbers, and you can use numbers as measurables, whereas most things you can't really use them as measurables. You go off of feel, you go off of experience, you go off of X factors that you know about a person. So you can have an educated opinion based on what you think is most important out of all the things. And I do think stats, when I analyze people personally, are one of the things I put towards the top. I definitely don't put stats towards the bottom, but if I may, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm totally using some Socratic questioning. I'm definitely pulling out some counselor techniques here, because this seems pretty emotionally charged for both of you, and I'm just curious if anything, are you referring to any one specific person's opinion that you seemed like you have a lot of, you're really trying to advocate for the Helmuths? Did somebody disrespect the Helmuths? Was it me? If so, I'm really sorry. What's going on here?
No, mine for the Helmuths comes from, I feel like over the last few years, I have seen them get rated in some weird ways. And to even lean into it, I feel like people are constantly saying, wow, Disco performed way better than I thought he was going to. And it's like, how many times are you going to have to see a tournament where Disco shows you he's a talented player for it to stick? Even same to keep it, again, the family as a joke, Aiden. There's a lot of people who I've heard say, wow, Aiden had a really good tournament this tournament. And it's like, how many times in a row does Aiden have to show that they can perform before they, receive that credit? And that's more where mine comes from. It feels like I keep hearing, and not just about those 4, I hear it about a lot of players where they're like, wow, this person really performed really well to this tournament. I didn't think they were going to do that. And I'll hear it several times. I just feel like I've heard it more about the Helmuths, and I'm kind of just scratching my cheek going, okay, when does it become fact rather than surprise?
Where mine comes from is they are absolutely the pinnacle of the human effect in laser tag. Everyone doubts them, but every time they go to a tournament, I'm not saying everyone doubts them. But every time they go to a tournament, they get underranked from where they are, and then blow every expectation out of the water because they're expected to be low. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely players throughout the community like that. I was I was projected to not be as high as I was during Nats last summer. A lot of people had me real low on their list of how I was going to do, but there was also people that had me really high on their list of how I was going to do. So it's just this stigma of stuff like that upsets me in this community. Of the helmets are just the perfect example right now of they go to a tournament and get underranked, and it's upsetting to see happen time after time because they are such a talented family at laser tag.
Sure.
And they are so incredibly.
I'll even throw a bone towards Connor. Connor has gotten a lot of slack about where his skill level ends up as a player. He's gotten a lot of flack for where his skill level is and where people think it is, and having to prove himself a lot. And I do think, while Connor doesn't travel all of the time, when Connor shows up, I see very consistent performances, and it kind of just it just surprises me a little that people seem so surprised. And one of the things that I've even mentioned to Aiden is I feel like, I'm trying to say this humbly, I feel like the reason I read players from other sites a little bit better is because I try so actively to talk to other sites about like their players, their performances, who are they, how do they synergize? Are they going to run off and try and be the hero because things are going wrong? Or are they going to fall back and play with their team, And, I have had long talks with Aiden, with DK. I've talked with Bean several times. I've talked with Cody several times. I've talked with Caleb and Snuffles a few times. I've talked with Nolan several times. So it gives me a much more, I feel, broad understanding of where people lay. And I think, especially with our community, that's very important, that we should not push people to talk to each other more, but that people should reach out with more of those questions about players. Because I feel like a lot of these kinds of tournaments come up and a lot of people are asking questions last minute. And if you've ever been asked a question at the last possible second, your brain farts. All answers go out the window that you swear you had a moment ago. And all of a sudden you're just like, I know this answer, but I have no answer right now. And so you give, what you can, and it may not be the entire whole story. And so I think mine is more of what I would like to see is, instead of just this kind of isolated leaning upon stats, a more continuous conversation about performances as a whole. Because, there are... One of the things that I'm responsible for in our site, as you two are aware, is I build games for us. And in my opinion, very commonly, the games that get built are fairly close. Sometimes they don't seem that way, but then they start playing out and everybody's like, wait a minute, this is a little closer. I definitely miss a few games. There are some games where I was like, wow, that was wrong. That was an incorrect matchup, and I will be noting that. But that's also something where it's isolated in a bubble, because I know how these players perform with one another. So when you have a random draw and I start adding more players into the pool, some players' values go up because they're better at, communicating and talking and working with each other and learning. And some players' values go down because they are not so used to the communication that may be required of them. They're much more lenient on the synergies that they've built inter-site, But again, there's tons to say. And too much theory. And I don't think either side is wrong, necessarily. I would like to say that. I don't think people who do use stats as a primary basis are incorrect. I just feel like it doesn't give the whole picture.
Absolutely. So I have a few things to say. Mind if I take the floor for a minute?
Go for it.
Go
I've just
for
been doing the old man yelling at the sky meme.
Oh yeah, for sure. I love that. And we all that's what this is for, you know, it's a platform to yell at the sky. So I had a funny thing the other day. So I work as a therapist. I work with a lot of people with anxiety, depression, and some couples. And there's this controversial book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. It was written by John Gray in the 90s, and it got really popular. It's a super hokey book that pretends like men are from a different planet than women, and they call them Martians and Venusians. And they talk about the Martians and Venusians in the most caricaturistic ways of like cartoonishly stereotypical men and women. And they talk about it like this is how men and women operate and how they can relate and talk to each other. They speak in such a way as though men don't have emotions and don't understand what emotions are and don't understand why women are so emotional all the time. Like I've had multiple people tell me it can be a little demeaning or insulting at times. Now, at the same time, there are some couples that when I meet them and I talk to them for a few minutes, I give them the book to take home because they're the perfect fit. They absolutely fit the stereotype. And they come back and they're like, wow, I understand my partner so much better. Thank you for the book. But the weird thing is like, there's an unwritten assumption that because some person wrote a book and I'm handing the book, that this is now gospel truth. Everything that's in this book, you have to live your life by, and they're making a bold claim about the universe that this is exactly how things work. I have to explain to people that it's just a book. It's just some dude's opinion from the 90s. He's obviously wrong about a lot of things. We are not caricatures. Everyone's an individual. And sometimes when I explain that, it's like people can be like, oh, and they can just look at the book, taking what they think is useful and leaving what is not useful, and not taking it so like, because they get emotionally upset at the book because they feel like they have to either agree with what the book says or something in the world is wrong. And I feel like people look at MVP this way. Like the implication, just because this number gets put on there, is that like some laser tag deity is proclaiming these top 5 players are in fact the top 5 players in Laserforce or for this tournament. That's kind of like why we design the numbers, is to like try to imitate that. But the thing is that in sports, everyone's got their freaking opinion. Even like I like watching football. I like fantasy football. Patrick Mahomes has won 2 Super Bowls in a row, and we won a third one 4 years ago. You got people that say he's the best quarterback of all time, and you got your people that will vehemently deny it and try to say that someone else is. And who's to say? The dude, like, it depends on how each of us chooses to measure what is the greatest quarterback ever. And just like how all the 3 of us have different ways of valuing a laser tag player. I've already talked a little bit in the previous episode, like things that I prefer in a player or a team. Clearly, I prefer a team that has, in a random draw tournament, the ability to have a high floor, no matter what the positional layout is. And based on the value I put on team 1, I decided, oh, I like the potential of, a Sweets, Satyrs, Azra, Minette, Heavy. If it was one of those rolled, I valued traits such as like tournament experience, having played in different arenas. Everyone on that team has played in a bunch of different arenas. Maybe Black Hammer not so much, but all the other ones, like I've seen them traveling around a lot. I like a player that knows how to communicate with other people. I like a player who has speed. I'm just going to say it. I do think speed is an advantage, especially on Commander or Scout. I think shot speed is one of the most important factors in the game that doesn't get talked about enough. Arena experience, definitely important. Do they know the angles of New York's arena? If they don't, they're going to struggle earlier in the beginning, less at the end. Like, my well of evaluating a player, I've just scratched the surface. There's lots of factors. MVP helps me organize it a little bit It allows me to simplify a player's value into a number. When I talk about a player's value as a number, I hope it's understood that I don't 100% agree and bow down to the MVP as the end-all be-all value of a player, but obviously I also valued it enough that I made a little chart showing where everyone ended MVP, because I think it's valuable in this way. The players who won more games got higher MVP. Also, players who lost games but contributed the most points, hit diff, and important variables got high MVPs even on losing teams. Beans, last place, top 6 player, for example. So it's not entirely based on wins. You could argue, did Ender get a top half MVP because he was on a winning team? Or is it because he's actually way better than people thought? Alex Bones, or Alex Boxes, sorry, you're Alex Bones now. Alex Bones was also on Team 2, but he was only in the top 30. So clearly Ender had something that Alex Boxes didn't. When we're talking about MVP, maybe it was roles. Ender played a lot of Commander and Heavy. This is what I'm talking about with the story behind the number. You gotta do your own research. But at the same time, I don't have 5 hours to delve into why I think every individual player is how they are. Sometimes I do simplify it a little bit, and I'm willing to bet on variables that I could be wrong about. You know what? I think this will happen, but let's be honest. What do I know? And clearly this tournament, for all three of us, shows what do we know? Things can go wildly wrong. That's the fun of sports. You're making bets, you're being bold on your claims, and how often can you really be right? The one thing I will say in defense of these tiers, it's comical now. We can paint the picture and we can see that these teams were not even. But how on earth could you expect them to really get even teams? I've seen tournaments that have had such worse spreads than this. If we look at the standings, the lowest team had 18 points, won 2 matches, won 7 games, lost 13. Top team won 14 games and lost 6. That's really good. In terms of equality, I can't think of a tournament that had a more even distribution between the top team and the bottom team. I have ideas for if they were to run another one tomorrow, how they might make the teams even more equal, or at least provide people less reasons to complain. But obviously, this seems to be a yearly tradition. They invent a new way to organize the teams. It doesn't work. People get upset because sports has variables and you can't predict the future. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Tell us how
by
you
no
really
means, and by no means am I mad about how the teams shook out. I do definitely feel one team was substantially stronger off the draw than others. But how many tournaments have we seen where a team looks insanely powerful and then just kind of has some mid performances, right?
Right.
And so I definitely think that stats is something to look at. And I definitely understand opinion based stuff. It does ultimately come down to those discussions, like you said, of who believes who should really go where. It just feels like it's tough to say it should work one way or the other. And I'm not trying to disparage the people who set this up at all, because like we've said, it was multiple people who put together a consensus. In terms of where players landed in their tiers, I think I would have put most of those players in that tier. So I can definitely understand how it got there. I think my only actual complaint about the tournament itself is more the randomness of random draw, where you do get, Grace playing over half of her games on 3 hits is tough, especially on her. She may not want to be doing that. And if Caleb's injured, I'm sure Caleb wasn't thrilled every time he pulled a 3 hit. I'm sure he was kind of like, all right, let me have a scout game. And he pulls Commander and he goes, I guess I'm running a lot again, And so there is definitely, and it's tough because how do you control something like that? How do you try to make it more even while also trying to keep it competitive. And so it's not easy by any means, nor is it something where I'm trying to be like, this is the solution. Here you all go. This is what we should be doing. It does just feel like over the years, I have watched some random draws in particular where I look and I kind of go, I don't understand how this person got devalued, you know? Then again, there were a bunch of people who
That's fair.
set up
Happens
lineups
all the time.
Yeah, and it could be, again, like you said, it could just be personal preference. I have, like I said, I have had to fight Autumn in particular as a 3-hit a lot. So I have very strong feelings about where she falls in terms of that skill rating. To also then, throw out another thing. If Autumn was an E tier player, when players, I believe both Raz and Ace were missing on the last day, I'm not sure. It might have been somebody else. Autumn was constantly subbing for players.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the fact that Autumn is being requested and constantly subbed in that lets me know that somewhere the captains understand that Autumn is probably a better pickup, because they're requesting intentionally a player. I always reference back to the West Coast that we held when we came out of all of the COVID stuff and the UK team came over and the fan played for them. I remember very actively Fan coming up for, I can't remember what his name was, their commander, his knee was hurt. And he had been putting up some ridiculous scores. And Fan walks up with the co-captain to me and goes, "Can we pick up Josiah?" And I just started laughing and went, no, you may not. Because I'm aware that even though statistically Josiah is being outperformed by this other player, I'm well aware how that's going to go, especially in our home arena. And I remember Than even smiling and laughing at me going, I had to try. It is something where I don't think people do it intentionally so that way they can try and get a better pickup. I definitely don't think that's the case. But I do think when things start to shake out, people realize very quickly who's not in the right positions, who should be higher rated and who should be maybe a little lower. Usually a little higher. Usually, in my opinion, people perform to their ratings, and there's a couple of people, like you said with Ender, is it because Ender was on the winningest team, or is it because Ender did really, really good? And the argument could be made for both. When I watched games from Ender was performing fairly well, so there's no doubts in my mind that it could be a multitude of things. So
Jarrett, you've been quiet. You got any thoughts?
Well, as far as this tournament goes, like I said, the human effect is so hard to predict, as far as how players are going to go. And James, Ender, I'm going to take the helmets off that list because a lot of us knew how the helmets do. They just got underranked, in my opinion. But like James and Ender, they exceeded expectations and exceeded where they were supposed to be. And some of the two players in that top group didn't even finish in the top 6. Like it's very difficult to come up with a list of players and expect it to work out 100% of the time. And it's very rare to find a tournament where the top team going in dominates the entire time. Mm-hmm. The human effect is just so strong and so unpredictable in this sport in particular. Like baseball, football, hockey, you could look at stats and know, all right, this team is going to win. Like last year, we had the top team in the league play the lowest team, and going in, everyone was like, all right, well, we know who's gonna win. We don't even need to watch this. And man, that underdog team won 4 out of 5 games that season against the top team in the league. The human effect is just something that is incredibly hard to predict, and I don't fault them for trying to find new ways to rank people, but no matter how you do that, people are always going to be upset after, because you will never get it 100% correct.
That's right.
Ever.
Not at all.
That's right.
Ever.
Can
You will never be able to. I'm going to not let you interrupt me for a second.
go ahead?
You are never going to, whether it's on stats or on the human effect, we are never going to be able to predict to a T even the top 5 players. Like, you are never going to be able to predict that. In hockey, I think in the last 10 years, one player that they have predicted to win an award won it. Those preseason predictions are just like this list. They try and predict who is going to do well, and it almost never works out. 99% of the time, it is going to be wrong. And until you get that one list of laser tag players that is absolutely perfect, somebody is going to be upset.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can interrupt me.
No, thanks for standing up for yourself. I didn't want to. You had a good point there. And such a good point that I wanted to kind of build on it. So, Jarrett, you and I play fantasy football. And Joe, you and I have in the past played fantasy LCS.
Yeah.
Like, so I've said this before, and I'm going to take my little soapbox moment, so just let me have this for a second. Why I think drafting teams in a snake order is the best way to go about it. So every sport's a little different. I understand where you're coming from, Jarrett, but I disagree a little bit. I think with Laserforce Space Marines, players tend to be a little more predictable than in a game such as hockey or football. We have players that perform over time. Drop-off tends to be pretty slow for some players, faster for others, but you definitely get players that break into the tournament scene. I think you can... I don't think it's unreasonable to say that you can put players into tiers and generally get them about their skill level. However, when you put players into different roles and different teams, their intrinsic value changes. For example, Jarrett, I think your value is a little different as a commander versus a scout versus a medic. And I think that value changes based on who you're playing with, too. I think some would argue that you and Strikva are similar in value in terms of commander play. But if I were building a team, there are some teams where I would definitely pick you over him, or him over you, based on what players I already have on the team, what comp I have, what strategy we're going for, the win conditions I'm trying to build on. Players are complicated things, right? So if you get 6 players that are all around this game skill level and who all have a good knowledge of the options in the option pool, when you allow players to draft, you allow them to build a team, not just pick the best 6 players. You allow them to pick players that will synergize with each other and work towards a vision that's predetermined in their head, or you're building one as you get going. If I were drafting and I got Caleb. I got Caleb on my team. It's like, okay, cool. I know Caleb's strengths and weaknesses. I especially like him on Commander. That's his calling card. I want to find him a good heavy now. I'm going to find a heavy that'll synergize with Caleb. Awesome. I need my resupply and my scouts. Or maybe I'm building the scouts first. I don't know. Maybe I get Snuffles and I want them to be a 1-2 punch because they synergize, right? You see how complicated this gets. The draft becomes part of the competition. If one of the teams is bad, it's because the captain had a bad draft. It's their fault. They get their takes, they get their opinions, and in the competition of drafting, maybe they got sniped by somebody, maybe the synergy they were going for doesn't work out quite so well, but instead of trying to force all the teams to be equal, you allow 6 people to to try to build the best team they can. And some of them are inherently going to come out a little bit ahead, but it's part of the game now. And at the very least, nobody comes out of the randomized draft or the random assigning of teams thinking, oh, come on, I got screwed over. If I had a choice, I wouldn't have let this happen, or I would have built differently around this, but I'm just kind of stuck with this now. Instead, it's more like, well, I thought this player would do better, or I thought these guys would synergize better. I guess I learned my lesson for next time. That's why I think snake drafts are the best way to go when you're building teams.
There's definitely... I'm not a huge fan of snake drafts, especially the more teams that you get in, because yes, it does feel like you really need to pick, but it does, especially if you have then 8 teams. Team 1 and 2 are in a bad spot potentially, because they have to grab whoever the strongest ones are, and they have to bank that most of those people will be gone by the time it comes back around. Right,
but then they also
almost 12 more picks occur between them going again. But they do then get, again, 2 picks basically in a row.
Mm-hmm.
But it can mess up, like you said, if you pick someone with the intent of synergy as your first pick on team 1, you pick a powerhouse, right? That would potentially synergize with some lower players, and then people pick different players than you're anticipating. Your synergy plan might very quickly go out the window, and so. This is something we can definitely go back and forth forever on, because there are a lot of different ways that it could play out for sure. And there are different schools of thought, in my opinion, on the ways that drafts can function and should function. And I don't think there's any one way that is, to quote, superior to other ones. I don't think there's any way that you can be like, oh, this is the best way to draft all of these things and set up like this. Again, just like we said at the beginning of this podcast, half the time it's a bunch of people who are just talking out of their ass. They have no actual, they have a good educated guess, but they don't actually know how it's going to fare. They don't know that it's going to go the exact way that they're hoping for. They're just kind of guessing at it, right? So...
Awkward pause.
Everyone responded.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, like you said, we can go back and forth forever. And the truth is, we've had plenty of snake drafts that have not turned out great, for one reason or another. I would say snake drafts are going to be unfair to somebody, because usually there's like a drop off into different tiers at different points of the draft. Like if there's a clear top 2, and then there's like a tier drop, the difference between player 2 and player 3 is like really drastic, then team 2 is going to have an advantage. They're going to get their really good player, and then team 3 is going to have to deal with the scraps. Maybe the top 8 players, there's like a big drop off between 8 and 9. Like, you're always going to have that. Someone's going to have to deal with the drop offs, and that's kind of part of it, though. Like, even in this random draw here with randomly assigned, that doesn't change the fact that there are, I suppose, intrinsic tiers that no one can really judge, and somewhere along the line people got different advantages. It's more like, is it randomly assigned if you get the short end of the stick, or is it by choice?
Sure.
In a really good draft, nobody thinks they got the short end of the stick.
Yeah. And again, there's dozens of ways that a tournament can shake out.
Totally.
I feel like we're getting a little away from the ECT setup in this more decision to about setup.
Oh, we totally are. Yeah, we've totally rabbit trailed. But ECT is inherently pretty random, and ironically, it turned out to be a very even tournament.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
And like, we're hitting 2-hour mark here soon, so we should probably wrap up. But I do want to ask you too, like, Joe, you had mentioned that some people were coming into this tournament not taking it quite so seriously. How much merit do you give people for winning an East Coast tournament or a random draw? Like, what did it take to win this tournament? How much credit can you give the players, and how much of it was chance?
So, it's not something where
Because Team Assassin was good.
Random draws. Yeah, it's not something where I completely write off random draws. At the end of the day, you still have to work hard to win a tournament, right? So there's no, oh, well, they won a random draw. That's not the same, right? But there is some, sense of randomness to it where you didn't all get to pick your positions. You kind of had to suffer what the dice said. And sometimes that was suffering and sometimes it wasn't. To me, it's more indicative that you are able to work with multiple other people when you come out of a random draw as a win, because you were able to synergize potentially with 5 other people that you may not play with very often, right? Or may never have played with. And so I do put a bit of stock into random draw wins and the East Coast and West Coast tournament wins in general, because it does still require you to be talented players to pull wins out. And like you said, I do think that shows, I could have seen Team Sweets taking games off of all 5 of the other teams, depending on draws and synergy, and I could have seen Team Assassin falling completely off because of maybe a bad draw or a bad synergy, right? And we were never going to know until they started playing. And it's indicative to me of teams who overcome that adversity that show strength and skill in that regard. Whether they rallied around, one person being like, here's what our game plan is going to be. And everybody was just like, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. This is what we're going to do. And, sometimes it is. One of the big things we talked about at Nats was the reason that we felt that John would do really, really well with ammo was because if I asked John to do something, his immediate response would be, okay, instead of arguing with me. It would lead to a lot more of the, hey, John, I need you to go help Luke because Luke just took 3rd floor. And John would be like, you got it. And he'd run over. And then sometimes you'd be like, I don't need you. Get out of here. And John would go, okay. And, right. Mm-hmm. And so it's indicative to me, especially in random draws, of players who can do that, who are willing to, if need be, step up and lead, or to help out if necessary, or if you need to, just helping follow, right? Going along with a plan and understanding, hey, this is what the plan we're setting up with is. We'll try it. And then if I do have concerns or something, I can bring it up after we try it, So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we need to wrap this thing up, guys.
Yeah, it's been too much time yapping.
No,
it's been a long time.
Yeah, we all did. Any final wrap-up thoughts?
Well done, everybody at the tournament. I hope everybody had a ton of fun. The games were very entertaining to watch. I hope everybody enjoyed themselves. I got to see some of Tivia's video. I don't know if that was the whole thing, the catching up with everybody. So it was good to see some familiar faces and hear some familiar voices. It was fun to watch the team dynamics, and I appreciate everybody going out to hang out and see one another and play some tag, because I did not get to this week.
Yeah, it was really awesome to watch. Again, we have no honor as spectators, but at least I got to watch, and I'm glad I got to. Really cool to see. It was really cool? Really cool to see all the new players that just totally emerged, and they were great. Some great new players into the tournament scene. I imagine this is partially how people felt about our B team from Nats, and I'm just overjoyed to see that Syracuse has such like a thriving player base. So, like I said, no pressure to come out to any tournaments, because clearly you don't need to. You can just stay at your home site and be better than everybody else, but like in terms of skill. But if you ever come out to another site to play, we would love to see you. And I do subscribe to the old-fashioned notion that playing at other sites does make you a lot better. So you can go back to Syracuse and kick even more butt after that.
Okay, boomer.
I feel like we're going to see a brand new Strictva and a much stronger Azra when they come back. Is what I am interested to see what they have taken away from this tournament.
Now you know how I felt every time y'all went to tournaments without me and came back, and I was like, ha, I'm in danger.
Yeah, then you just absorbed it through photosynthesis from us.
Just punching it in the throat.
All right, we'll go ahead.
All I have to say is...
we're going to interrupt Jared again. Goodbye, everybody. No, go ahead, Jared. What you got?
All I wanted to say was I hope everyone had fun. I miss you all. Come out to Colorado. Come play. I know Sweets is asking to come play again. So come play. That's it. Hope everyone had fun.
We're setting something up hopefully in a few months.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Nice. We don't have AstroTurf, and you do have to run up and down ramps.
Yes. It will be... yeah. We'll see. We're still talking about it, but we're hoping to have a Mega Members Night before Nats. So might be a good time for some Nats players to come out and get a little more practice with one another.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. See y'all then. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.